connecting the Parsha with what's happening in the world, what's happening in our lives, and using it to get strength, clarity, and comfort in these times. And the first thing I mentioned was just this incredible realization, looking in the Parsha and just seeing very simply that Sarah Imeinu is taken by Avimelech, the king of the Plishtim. And Plishtim is Gaza. Gaza is the area of the Plishtim in the time of the Torah. That was their land. And in fact, Plishtim is the root word of the word Palestine. I just learned this week, the Romans used the word Palestine from the Plishtim to snub at the Jewish people and try to erase the Jewish people from the land of Israel. And that is another piece from the Parsha that I want to mention before getting into the main shir, which is that in this week's Parsha, Sarah Imeinu tells Avraham that Yishmael has to leave. He's a bad influence on Yitzchak and he has to go. And as we know, Hashem says to Avraham, she's right, listen to what she's saying. You might not understand it, but she appreciates something that you don't appreciate. So what is it that she appreciated about Yishmael that we need to appreciate today as well? The Pasuk explains to us, and the Mefarshim explained, that at that point, Yishmael was already involved in the worst things. He was already a murderer, he served Avodah Zarah, Gilei Arayos, all, the Gimel Yehereg Ve'al Ya'avor, the worst of the worst. He was already involved with all of it. And yet, when Sarah Imeinu tells Avraham that he has to go, the reason that she gives is not because of all of that, but rather, I'm going to read it, Vatomer LaAvraham, and she said to Avraham, Garesh ha'ama hazos, send away, cast away this woman who was Hagar. I'm just going to mute. Here we go. This woman who is Hagar, right? Ve'es bina, and her child, ki lo yirash ben ha'ama hazos im bini im Yitzchak. Because this woman, this maidservant, and the son of this maidservant will not inherit together with my son, with Yitzchak. So she doesn't say to Avraham, he's a really bad influence because he's a murderer and he's serving Avodah Zarah and illicit relations, and therefore he needs to go. She says, you see, the biggest issue here, the biggest problem here, all those things we can deal with. The biggest problem here and the root of the problem, the root of his moral denigration and the root issue of why he's a bad influence and he cannot be in this home is because he denies the fact that Yitzchak is going to be the inheritor. He is claiming that he will inherit all of Abraham's Yerusha, which really means Eretz Yisrael, together with Yitzchak. And he was not acknowledging the fact that Hashem clearly told Avraham that Yitzchak will be the heir and the father of the Jewish people. So again, looking at this and recognizing this is the problem. This is the problem. The fact that Yishmael is denying that the Jewish people were given the land of Eretz Yisrael, starting with Yitzchak. Right? Avraham to Yitzchak, not Avraham to Yishmael. So we have to have that clarity that Sarah Imeinu had, and she said he cannot live side by side Yitzchak without acknowledging that. If you want to live in our land and acknowledge and recognize this is the land of the Jewish people, this is the Holy Land, this is the place where Hashem gave it to us, fine, we can all live in peace. But if you're going to deny that, we're going to have issues. So the main idea that I actually want to explore today is from Akeidas Yitzchak. A very famous question on Akeidas Yitzchak, also in this week's Parsha, is why do we give Avraham Avinu the credit for passing the test of Akeidas Yitzchak? We say, it's one of his 10 tests, and not only that, it was the greatest test, and we say, unbelievable, Avraham Avinu passed this incredible test, when Yitzchak was the one who was willing to give his life. So, yay, Avraham, but what about Yitzchak? Yitzchak was the one who was actually willing to give his life. How come we don't give him more credit? And one answer you can explain that also I feel really relates to today is that when you have Mesiras Nefesh, you're willing to give your life. When that's coming from yourself, I am willing to give my life, it's still different than a parent willing to sacrifice their child's life. So the fact that Yitzchak was able to do that is different than Avraham being willing to sacrifice his son. And for me, that also gave me comfort in thinking about the families of the Chayalim, not knowing who is going in, who will come back alive, who, as we know, so many soldiers have already fallen in Gaza. May their memory be a blessing. And the families of the Chayalim, the mothers, the wives, the fathers, the brothers, the sisters, the cousins, all of us, Am Yisrael, we're all family. That's harder in a way. And not to diminish at all the incredible self-sacrifice of the Chayalim. You look at them, they're pumped. Yeah, they know how serious this is. They're pumped, they're simcha. We get strength from them. Their self-sacrifice is like Yitzchak. He was ready. And yet, the family, we have to get strength from them. And Avraham got strength from Yitzchak. The fact that Yitzchak was willing, so willing to do this, Avraham got strength from that. So we look at the Chayalim and we see how ready, how willing they are to put their life on the line, very literally, for the sake of Am Yisrael. And so I just thought of that parallel and wanted to share that as well. That the families, the incredible Mesiras Nefesh of the families of Chayalim, Hashem should give you strength, and all of us strength. So that's actually just a side answer. The answer that I want to focus on is an answer by Reb Mendel of Haraduk. He says that the truth is, for tzaddikim like Avraham Avinu and like Yitzchak, giving their life to fulfill Hashem's command, no biggie. Hashem told them to do this, so of course they're going to sacrifice. Of course Yitzchak was going to sacrifice his life if that's what God said. And of course Avraham was going to do that if that's what God said. So that wasn't the test. I know this is like putting all your education, through a loop, but that wasn't the test. What was the test? Reb Mendel Harduk says, the great test for Avraham Avinu was refraining from, in quotes, weighing the ways of God, calculating, trying to understand. What does this mean? The Lubavitcher Rebbe explains what this means. You see, Avraham Avinu was a rationalist by nature. He was a man of reason. He was repelled by the irrational. He could not fathom the irrational bugged him. He was a man who he had to understand things, and that is how we know he came to appreciating Hashem. That's how he came to recognize Hashem, as we know from the Midrash, right? The young Avraham, 3 years old, looks around the world and says, right, there must be a creator. And he looks at the Avodah Zarah that everybody was serving, and he says, that's incredibly stupid. He used his brain to come to that conclusion, right? He asked them, as we know, you're serving a God that was just created this morning and is younger than you, right? It has eyes but cannot see, it has ears but cannot hear. He exposed the stupidity and the hypocrisy of idol worship. And he rejected the religious beliefs of the whole world at that time out of simple logic. The Midrash tells us that Avraham was like a person walking through a forest, and he sees a mansion fully lit. And he concludes, there must be a master of this home. Has to be. A mansion in the middle of nowhere, fully lit, running, beautiful. There must be a master of this home. I remember when I was teaching Hebrew school for many years, first graders, when I taught them about Avraham and how he came to recognize Hashem, I would bring a painting in, like just, a scene, some beautiful scene, sunset or some other thing. And I'd say, guess what? One night, a bunch of paint smushed together, splashed together, and look what happened. Isn't this a beautiful painting? And they were like, no, that didn't happen. You're joking. And I'm like, why? Why do you feel that way? Why do you feel that colors couldn't just have like smashed together, big bang, boom, and then there's this beautiful painting? Because even a first grader understands that a piece of artwork has an artist. And I asked them, look at the world around you. It's a piece of art. What's your favorite part of the world? And they told me flowers, the sun, the snow, the trees, the beach, certain animals that they liked. And I printed pictures for them of each one that they liked, and we put a frame around it. And we said the world is a work of art, and God is the artist. This is what Avraham recognized. He looked around the world and he said, this is such an exquisite, beautiful world. It's running in such a clear way. I mean, if you know anything about earth science, or today, if you know anything about biology, how the body works, only a fool would think that there isn't a creator. So he recognized with his brain, there must be somebody who created all of this, who is creating it always, and orchestrating it and making it all run so beautifully. And this is God. This is who he recognized. This is the God that then Avraham told the entire world about, and taught the world about the one God, the creator of the world. So again, we're talking about a person who used his seichel, his intellect, trying to understand God. And therefore, all of Avraham Avinu's tests, we know he had 10 tests, they were all a test on this nature of his. That is what really every challenge to each of us in our lives is. It's trying to get us to go out a little bit out of the limitations of our nature. And that's actually another Dvar Torah from last week, from Parsha's Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha, go out, Lech Lecha me artzecha, umi moladdecha, umi beis avicha, ela artza shara echa, is in a nutshell saying, go out of yourself, go out of your limitations, the limitations of your nature, of your nurture, how you were brought up, mi beis avicha, from the limitations of your culture and your society, and how you were and how you were assimilated in the world, and the thoughts and behaviors that you assimilated from the culture and society around you, and from the house that you grew up in, and also from your nature. That's eretz, artzecha, your ratzon, your desires, your personal tendencies. And the Parsha last week was teaching us that Hashem was telling Avraham to go out of all that. Where to? El ha'aretz asher ar'eka. I'll show you the way. Follow me, Hashem says. We have the ability, each of us, to go a little bit beyond ourselves, beyond the limitations of our nature and our nurture. And we have the ability to do what Hashem needs us and wants of us in this world, whatever that is, right? Hashem didn't say, go here. He said, follow me, right? And we follow Hashem wherever you take me. And we have the koach to do that because Avraham was given the koach to do that in Parshas Lech Lecha. So the first of those tests last week is simply that Avraham was asked to leave Haran and go to somewhere else. Now, again, this is somebody who just built up the biggest Chabad house in the world, the greatest following. He was established. He was set. He had a following where he was, and he had, it was all going so well. Why leave? Right? How could I leave? I have it all set up here. And God says, no, I know it doesn't matter if you get it or you don't get it. Just go. And sure enough, Avraham Avinu did not ask any questions, and he followed Hashem. And then, as we know in last week's Parsha, he gets there, and immediately, famine. There's a famine. So I don't know about you, but if it was me, I'd be like, wait, God, okay. So you want me to come to this land, or you don't? Because if you want me to come to this land, and now you're giving me and there's a famine here, and now I have to leave the land, like, do you want me here or not, right? But Avraham Avinu did not ask any of those questions, and he followed Hashem. And he recognized that, okay, so Hashem wanted me to come here, and now there's a famine, and I have to get food because that's, we gotta live, so I gotta go somewhere else. And I'll just keep doing it. He wasn't daunted by challenges like that. And again, each of these things are a test for Avraham because he was a man of reason. If it didn't make sense to him, it was a challenge for him. And yet he showed time and time again this incredible emunah in Hashem. The ultimate example of this conundrum, the ultimate example of such a test to Avraham's sense of reason was the Akeidas Yitzchak. I'm going to explain to you why in two ways. One is Avraham Avinu was a man of chesed. We know Avraham Avinu was chesed, Yitzchak was gevura. He was the epitome of chesed. Not only that, he believed in Hashem as a God of kindness. He believed in Hashem's kindness, and unlike the avodah zaras of the world at that time, in which it was a common practice to sacrifice your child for the avodah zara, he preached about a God. He taught the world about a God who created the world and wants you to live in this world, not sacrifice your children. And then God is telling him to do that very thing? That makes no sense. After all he's worked in his whole life to make Hashem's name great in this world and teach the world about Hashem, this Hashem of kindness and a one God who wants you to live in this earth. And then they're going to hear, oh, well, he just sacrificed his child for God. That doesn't add up. And it's completely bad publicity for this God that he's been working his entire life to teach about. So that's on one level, just recognizing that the very idea of sacrificing his child just doesn't add up to the God of his understanding and to the God that he worked so hard to teach the world about. But there's another thing, which is that Hashem promised Avraham Avinu that Yitzchak, and specifically Yitzchak, would be his heir. The heir of Eretz Yisrael, the father of the Jewish people, great nation. And again, before Yitzchak was born in last week's Parsha, when Hashem tells him that, Avraham says, well, I have Yishmael, why not Yishmael? And God says, nope, it's got to be Yitzchak. So Hashem was very clear that it will be Yitzchak. And now, Kach na es bincha es yichidcha asher ahavta es Yitzchak. Very clear who he's talking about. Take this son, take for me your son, your only one, the one that you love, Yitzchak, and sacrifice him on an altar. That doesn't add up. So wait a minute, God, you want my child to be the heir and the father of the Jewish nation, but now you're telling me to kill him. Now, he didn't have any children yet, right? So this is like, that is just the ultimate brain confounder. It makes zero sense. If you were to ask Avraham Avinu, as he's on his way to Har HaMoriah, towards Akeidas Yitzchak, and you ask him, so, how does that make sense? Got 10 minutes. How does that make sense? You know he'd say? I don't know. It doesn't add up. There was zero reason, zero sense. It could not be resolved. It was an issue that just could not be resolved. Yitzchak is going to be the heir. God's telling me to sacrifice him on an altar. And yet, Avraham Avinu, a man of seichel, who rebelled against an entire civilization because they made no sense to him, was ready to do something for Hashem that made no sense. Why? Because God said so. So, the lesson here is not simply we follow Hashem even when it makes no sense, although that's a very important lesson too. Kabbalah's Ol, very important lesson. The lesson here is trying to understand, what did Avraham Avinu appreciate that allowed him to do something that really just didn't add up? What Avraham Avraham, what we need to appreciate about Avraham Avinu is that at the end of the day, Avraham Avinu was committed to serving Hashem, not to seichel, not to reason. Yes, his mind, his logic, his understanding may have brought him to a recognition of God. But once he found God and God found him and God formed this intimate connection with him, Lech Lecha, and turned him into the first Jewish person, that's it. Hashem took him from a place of reason to beyond a place of reason. And Avraham Avinu recognized that this God that he serves is beyond seichel, is beyond reason. Not only that, you know why God is beyond seichel? Because he created seichel. Seichel, intellect, understanding, being able to figure things out with our logic is a creation. So God, of course, is beyond the ability to understand because God created the ability to understand. So whenever there's a paradox and a contradiction in our brain, something that we cannot understand and doesn't add up, is not an issue for Hashem. And that's what it means to be infinite. Because infinite means he's not limited to this or that, A or B, black or white. That would be limiting. As Rabbi Taub always says, anything in Judaism, if the question is it A or is it B, the answer is always yes. Paradox is not a problem in Judaism. Because our God is an infinite God. And when we can't fathom him, we can't understand him, that's not a problem for us. Just like Avraham Avinu, ready to sacrifice his son for Hashem. It's not an issue for us. So, what I want to take from this specifically for what we're going through right now is when we look around in the world or in our life, and we see things happening, again, in our life or in the world. It's happening in Eretz Yisrael. And we look at that and we say, hold on a second, this doesn't add up. We're taught that we have a loving, kind Father in heaven, Hashem. And yet what I see is, how does that make sense? That what God is doing, because we know Einod Milvado, nothing happens without God's approval. How can that up to the kind and loving Hashem that we know? And we look at Avraham Avinu, and we look at his willingness to sacrifice his son. And in that moment, when he showed us what it means to be a Jew, he showed us what it means to have true emunah in Hashem. It means that we don't have to make calculations. Like Reb Mendel of Horoduk said, he didn't weigh the ways of God. We don't need to get busy with those calculations because we'll never understand it. We can't understand it, not until Mashiach comes. So can we understand it? No. Does it make sense to us? No. Fine. Perfect. That's where emunah steps in. Emunah is the sense that I am connected with Hashem even when I cannot fathom his ways. Even when it does not make sense to me. Even when the God that I know of, the God that I appreciate and I serve and I recognize, and what I see happening doesn't add up. That's the ultimate Mesiras Nefesh. And that's the ultimate emunah that we learn from Avraham Avinu in this week's Parsha. So I give us a bracha that we should all take koach, take strength from Avraham Avinu. And that's exactly what the Torah is all about. What the stories in the Torah are there for us is it's a nesinas koach. It's a giving over of koach. The stories aren't there just to even not even to learn a lesson from, but it's actually to show us that whatever qualities Avraham Avinu has, we have access to. So if he had the ability to follow Hashem and do what to just Ela Artz Asher Eka, God, show me where I need to go. Show me what I need to go. And in every moment, in this moment, If what I think you're telling me to do is to do something so crazy that makes no sense, that's what I'm going to do. And if in the next moment you tell me something else, that's what I'm going to do. Hashem, just show me the way. Show me where to go. Show me what's the next step. Where do I need to go? Where do I need to be? And I'm not going to get, and the Nesinas Koch from Avraham is not to get stuck in the how, why, what, I don't understand, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, look, we've never understood. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't understand. Lama harei osai es ha'am hazeh. Why do you do bad to this people? Do we understand why the Holocaust happened? No. Do we understand what's happening now? Not at all. We can't fathom it, and we shouldn't. We shouldn't try. Nobody should try to understand. It's not the point. The point is, we are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. We are people of faith. We're connected with Hashem, and we're connected with Hashem that is beyond reason, beyond understanding. So when we don't understand, we don't get stuck. We stay strong in our faith. And we do the next right thing, and the next right thing, and the next right thing, until, please God, Mashiach will come, and we won't have such questions anymore. All right, ladies, have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Shabbos.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.